A very warm welcome on a very rainy day in Mysore. It's so heartening to see so many of us here. I'm sure they would have been a lot more had the weather been more kind. Such an honor and a pleasure to welcome you all to the third year of these series. And today marks the 36th episode of these talks. So thank you very much for being here, Dr. Natesh, and it gives me immense pleasure to introduce you. Dr. S. Natesh taught botany at the University of Delhi for nearly a decade before moving to the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, in 1984. At the department, he headed several divisions, including bioresources, medicinal and aromatic plants, environmental biotechnology, food biotechnology, aquaculture, marine biology, biotechnology for societal development, and international collaboration. He was also the first member secretary of the National Bioresource Development Board, and he has edited DBT's bi-monthly newsletter, Biotech News. Through his dynamic leadership, several new and novel programs have been successfully launched at DBT. Some of them include digitized inventories of bioresources of India and the plant resources of the Western and Eastern Ghats, a butterfly park for breeding and conservation of butterflies of peninsular India at the Bangalore National Park, 4 rural biosource complexes, and 5 gene banks for aromatic plants. He has helped negotiate and set up the Wellcome Trust, the BT India Alliance, for delivering a program of postdoctoral fellowships in biomedical sciences and served as its founding trustee for over 7 years. He was instrumental in building other robust collaborations in biotechnology with Canada, Denmark, Finland, Germany, and the UK. Additionally, Dr. Natesh campaigned to bring hundreds of overseas Indian bioscientists back to India through the Ramadita Swami PhD Fellowship. Following his superannuation from DBT in 2012, Dr. Natesh served as a consultant advisor at the National Institute of Immunology and the PhD Center for Policy Research in IIT Delhi. Currently, he is an honorary fellow of the Ashoka Trust of Research in Ecology and Environment. His recent interests include tracking and mapping the heritage trees of India and plants that influence history. His work on heritage trees has resulted in a book, Iconic Trees of India, recently published by Rowley Books. The book has been prominently featured in all the major literature festivals across India, including Authors in Calicut, Nainital Lit Fest, Bangalore Green Lit Fest, Bhopal Lit Fest, and Jaipur Lit Fest. Dr. Natesh has traveled widely and led several biotech delegations abroad. He has served on the advisory boards of several institutions, agencies, and ministries. And Dr. Natesh received the Biospectrum Lifetime Achievement Award for elevating the Indian biosciences sector. A new plant species, I'm not sure if I'm spelling it right, Apollo Jeton Natesh has been named in his honor. It's an incredible honor to have this here with us. We greatly look forward to hearing from you. And the books which are being displayed out there, they are magnificent, they're beautifully produced. So we look forward to your wonderful evening. Welcome. Thank you.
Very good evening to all of you, and thank you for coming on a rainy day to listen to me. First of all, let me say my grateful thanks to the organizers for having me over today to speak to you, especially Dr. Sharma, who asked me to be here with you today, and I'm keenly looking forward to share the work on iconic trees that I have carried out in the last few years. Uh, and what I'm going to do through this lecture is I'm going to speak for the first few minutes about generally about trees, why are they important to us, and then I'm going to talk about what are iconic trees and what are heritage trees and iconic trees, why are they important, why must be preserved, and then I will go on giving you a few examples of iconic trees across the country. I will take you from one state to another and tell you about their stories associated with them, uh, connecting these trees to people, science, culture, and history. So, without too much further ado, let me start my talk. The title is that the tree that swallowed a border post and other iconic trees of India. I'll come to the one that swallowed a border post later. But first, let me talk to you about where do we stand vis-a-vis trees the world over. According to a recent estimate, the world has some 3.04 trillion trees. And India's contribution to that number is 35.1 billion. Unfortunately, 15 billion trees are being cut down every year. And if that continues at the current rate, by 2050, the world tree number would have fallen to just 2 trillion. And I don't think we have much to pat ourselves about because of that. If you look at the world as a whole community of people, the number of trees per person in the world is 422. That's the world average for every person who has 422. However, Canada, for example, has 10,163 trees per person. And if you keep going along that graph, a cartoon, there is Greenland, there is Australia, there is United States, which has 699 trees per person, France 203, Ethiopia 143, UK 47, because China has 130, and India has just 28 trees per person. So that's not a very great state of affairs as far as we are concerned. I don't have to remind you that trees are vital from all ecological, economic, and cultural perspectives because they serve as our sources for food, fiber, timbers, drugs, dyes, resins, gums, tannins, and 100 of other products that we use on a daily basis. Trees also combat climate change by taking away carbon dioxide in the process of photosynthesis, and they release oxygen into the air, cleaning up the air for us, and they shield us from UV light. Trees cool our towns and cities. Anybody who travels on a road without trees in summer and then go to an avenue lined by trees will immediately know the difference between the value of trees for shade and cool. So they cool our towns and cities. They conserve water because they actually trees give up water they evaporate water through their stomatal holes, and thereby they bring about precipitation and rain to our cities and towns and forests and so on. They mitigate pollution because they also absorb dust and they act as air conditioners. They prevent soil erosion. Trees also provide canopy and habitat for wildlife. There are many animals which seldom come down to the soil. Most of the time of their life is spent on the canopies of trees. For example, there are species of hornbirds. There are species of flying squirrels. These never come down to the earth except where the canopy is broken. When they can't jump from one tree to the other, they come down and then again go up on another tree. So they also mark seasons. You can make out which season it is by which tree is flowering at that time. So they herald seasons, beautify spaces, lend scenic and aesthetic value, and increase the worth of property. Just think about the basic biological phenomena that we could learn from trees. Those of you who live in multi-story buildings, if you don't have electricity for one day or even a couple of hours, you can't pump up water to the top floors. And when you do, that engine, the pump makes so much noise, it consumes so much energy, it gives up smoke and so on. But trees stand in one place, and some of them grow as tall as 6th or 7th or 8th floors. And then they pump up water so silently without polluting the air. And that's one basic phenomenon of how conduction of water to heights, which are 6th floor, it's a 7th story. That's one basic understanding you could have. Just think of the fact that trees live for hundreds of years and in many cases thousands of years. What is the secret of their longevity? Can we identify the gene and can we use it for human longevity, which is of course a foolish thing to do, I suppose. But theoretically, it's a very interesting thing of how a gene for longevity could be cloned from a tree and introduced to other life forms. And finally, there are many other things like nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, water cycle, and many other basic cycles in the forest which trees are part of. Older and larger trees are even more important than younger and less tall trees. Why so? Because larger and older trees sequester disproportionately larger amounts of carbon dioxide compared to smaller trees. They are also proxies for past climates. I'll come to this, I'll give you an example later of how this is so. They capture what happened in long ago periods, what kind of climates existed then in their growth rates. And by knowing how to read their growth rates, we can understand what past climates were like. And they're also focal points for local traditions. There is also, because of their age and longevity, they are evidences of long relationships between people and places. And they bring back memories, events, emotions, and myths. And finally, they could be magnets for tourists and pilgrims, and therefore they could be ambassadors of ecotourism. Instead of just having a tiger safari, one could have a tree safari, where outstanding trees could be, one could take people around and tell them stories about such trees. In spite of all this, trees are under threat in the world or across the world. According to a survey which was conducted relatively recently by the Global Tree Assessment, almost one-third of the tree species are threatened with extinction. Those, the first three lines there, the orange colored trees, are those which are under threat of extinction. And the black one in the first tree, those are already gone. And the next line, you see the yellow ones, they are likely to be threatened with extinction. And about 7% or 8% of the species at the bottom, we hardly know anything about them. Therefore, more than one-third of tree species could be under threat of extinction. We don't know. We don't have enough data. And that means One in every three tree species is on its way out already. Developed economies show great interest in exceptional trees. I mentioned why exceptional trees, which means larger, older trees, are more important than younger trees. Why so? And how do they do this? They whip up this interest through attractive books, citizen science projects. For example, people are invited to suggest the largest trees in their district, the oldest trees in their district. And many of these countries, states, districts, they all make what are known as heritage tree registers or champion tree registers. These trees are actually renewed, updated once every 6 months or once every year. So that what is the oldest tree today may not be the oldest tree tomorrow. Because the more knowledge you gain, the more entries you will get in your digital data, and the digital registers are uh, continuously upgraded or updated. They also do these canopy walks. Even countries like Singapore and Vietnam have tree canopy walks to attract people. And champion tree registers are regular activities in the UK, the USA, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, EU, and even countries like Singapore, Vietnam, South Africa, and so on. But in India, we have not even begun to have a discussion on such heritage trees. What should we be doing with them? Why is it important to do such research? So, information on India's heritage trees is woefully inadequate. Our culture is very ancient, but remember that we were mostly an oral culture. We never kept records which following generations could use. And therefore, uh, it is all hearsay from one person, one generation to the next, but we don't have really good records. Tree species are associated with gods. Several trees are associated with gods, as you know. The banyan, Ashwatha, you have Bilva, you have, pear trees. Many of them are embodiments of the Trinity or other deities. And there are many of them which are associated with saints. For example, Adi Shankara is supposed to have meditated under a mulberry tree in Joshimath. And there are many other trees. Guru Nanak, for example, is associated with many bear trees. Six venerate trees. There are many gurdwaras. I think about 28 gurdwaras which are named after trees. Am Sahib, Gurdwara Am Sahib, which means mango. Gurdwara Bear Sahib, and so on and so forth. Buddhists associate the people tree because Buddhism was born under a tree. And every Jain Tirthankar, for example, 24 of them, are associated with a particular tree. Either they got enlightenment under them or they gave their first sermon under such trees. In spite of all this, we know very little about many of our trees outside the regions of their occurrence. People, if I ask you here, how many heritage trees, how many iconic trees of India, all of you know, or each one of you know, maybe you should be able to count it on one hand. Whereas if you go to other countries, which I mentioned before, there are regular registers maintained and updated. There are also competing claims for the largest and the oldest. These are not done with scientific verification. These are done through social media without any basis. So, agriculture, deforestation, urbanization, and climate change are all the drivers that drive the loss of trees from our country. I just have put some data. It could be true for any state in this country. Delhi sacrificed 3 trees per hour during the Kejriwal government regime in 2019 and 21. Widening of National Highway 59 in Odisha's Ganjam district destroyed 1,700 odd trees. Uh, in one of the parliament questions, the Minister for Environment and Forests admitted that they gave permission to the killing of 11 million trees during the 3-year period between 2015 and 2019 for various development projects across the country. And people in Mysore have been very agitated because 40 trees were cut overnight in one of the roads here, which didn't even require widening. So, the one that is now looming in everybody's face is this Great Nicobar project. The government says they're going to cut 1 lakh trees, but NGOs say that the number is actually 3 lakh trees or something like that. So, trees are the first things to be destroyed in any development project. So, before we move further, let me define what iconic trees are or heritage trees are. When I say iconic trees, I mean they are individual trees with remarkable qualities that assume cultural or religious or historical or other significance and are inseparable components of our national heritage. Uh, they could make you amazed at them, you may wonder at them, you may be filled with actually great wonder when you behold one of such trees, but they won't leave you with indifference. You can't be indifferent to them because they leave an indelible impression upon you. And they are recognized by local communities, but outside they are largely unknown, even outside the village or state or the region in which they occur. However, wherever they are, such tree champions are a priceless national resource and they should be treasured, nurtured, and protected. When we say iconic trees, I have made some 6 or 7 categories of such trees. They just don't include only the oldest trees or the largest trees. That is one criteria. Ancient specimens which are survivors of a long gone age. That is, age is the criterion for calling something an iconic tree. The second criterion could be record dimensions, the tallest, the largest, the biggest, the widest canopy, whatever. Then trees of historical importance, being linked to important events, personalities, places, or periods. For example, the tree under which Gandhiji used to hold prayer meetings every day when he was in Dandi during the Salt March. For me, it's a greatly historical tree of historical importance. There could be trees which are associated with real people like Buddha, who attained enlightenment, the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya. So that would for me be an iconic tree. So the next category is they are botanical weirdos or botanical oddballs. They could be rarities, interesting introductions, or having features of special botanical interest. I will give you a couple of examples later. Then trees of religious significance or cultural importance. I'll also give you an example or two. And finally, I have also included avenues and groves of particular importance or significance. Let me just tell you, however, that some of the trees may not belong to just one of these categories. The same tree could be of historical relevance and be also very old, or it could be a botanically weird thing, but could also be largest or oldest or whatever. So they may fit into more than one category. These are not watertight compartments. So, my work on iconic trees celebrates this diversity among such trees and it links individual trees to botany, history, culture, and people. And I have selected some 75 living trees chosen from a long working list across India. And these include now age-wise patriarchs, those that remind us of historic events or personalities. They could be gentle, wish fulfilling giants. They could be those that bring back memories of gory deaths and dark punishments, and there could be many others like this. For every tree that I have included in this book, I have gone and seen each one of them in their habitat, wherever they are embedded in the cultural milieu of India. And this book was published last year by Rowley Books. Hopefully, this work will encourage preparation of district, state, and national level heritage tree registers, stimulate more studies on linking trees to science, people, history, and culture, inspire public participation in nominating heritage trees for heritage tree registers, and finally, create better awareness for tree protection and tree conservation. So before we go and talk about very ancient trees, you may ask me, how do we measure the age of a tree scientifically? There are basically two methods by which you can ascertain the exact age of a tree. One is called radiocarbon dating, where you measure the half-life of carbon, C14, which is an isotope of regular carbon, and you measure how much of that isotope is left in an organic matter in the tree. This method is not used very much in tree dating in India, although it has been employed in archaeology very much. So there are only 5 studies on Indian trees using radiocarbon dating, and all these have been done outside India. So I won't go into details about this, but I'll come to the other one, the other method, which is called dendrochronological method, or measuring the age of a tree by counting the number of growth rings or annual rings that it has. Now, how do you measure that? You actually take an instrument, borer, this instrument that you see here, the guy is using here. This gentleman is from the Sanje Institute of Paleosciences in Lucknow, one of the most premier organizations for conducting climatological research. So what they do is they carry these borers with them to the field, and you insert this borer to the trunk of a tree which needs to be measured at what is known as breast height, or 130 centimeters from the ground level. And then you insert that, and you bring out a cylinder the size of less than a pencil, diameter of a pencil. And then you take it to the lab, dry it, and then polish it off with sandpaper, and then it will reveal the kind of growth rates that it will have, like this. And when you measure or when you try to date the rings, the one nearest to you, near the path, will be this year's growth rate. The one next to it, suppose it is 25 year, then the outermost growth ring would be 2025. Then the next one is 24, 23, and so on. And as you go to the center of the tree, the older and older rings will be visible to you. Therefore, you can actually date each ring with a calendar year. Now there are computer softwares available with you. The second thing you should notice is that all the rings don't have the same width. Some rings are very narrow, some rings are much wider. The wider rings occurred when the tree was facing very nice conditions for its growth. The narrower the ring, the more adverse the conditions were where the tree was growing. So you can also determine which year, calendar year, was adverse for the growth of trees, which year was very conducive to the growth of trees. Therefore, the larger the diameter of the rings, the better the living conditions were. So you have to determine what is that condition which drove it. Is it precipitation? Is it an insect attack? Is it some other thing? That you will know when you sample many trees, and then you say that is the important driver. For different areas, those drivers will be pertinent. So the measuring or assigning a calendar year to the growth ring is called dendrochronology. Dendron means wood, chronology means time. So you assign a year to each growth ring. From this, you can make out past climates. That is why I said trees capture climatic data in their growth rates. So you can make out how the conditions were for their growth. So that science is called dendroclimatology. So these two, you can't do dendroclimatology without doing dendrochronology. So this is how they do it. The trees don't die, they don't get injured. So you need not kill the tree by doing this thing. So once you did that for a living tree, and you went up to say this was, let's say this tree was 800 years old. So this is the outermost ring. Here is the 800th ring, 800 years old ago. Suppose you then sample, make a core sample from a dead tree in that area, which was very old, much older than this, and therefore you match the rings exactly with the first one. And then you can go back in time here. And then suppose you find some archaeological buildings where you have timber available, where you have old pillars, beams, windows, doors. You can make core samples from those, and you can match this with that, and the rings will match, the exact years will match. Therefore, you can go back like that. So, like this, people have built very long chronologies for different regions. For example, the Irish oak chronology goes back to 8,500 years. And there is what is known as bristlecone pine in the US, California, which goes back to 13,500 years. I mean, how many years before the birth of Christian, era, and so on and so forth. Many of those trees have been existing while the pyramids were still being built. They were already big trees. So this is how you can build a very historic and long chronologies using the tree-ring technique. Now let's see some old and large trees from India. I'm only going to speak from now on about Indian trees. So, what is the oldest tree from India which has been measured through dendrochronology, not by hearsay, scientifically determined age, officially, which is the oldest tree from India? This is a tree which was discovered in 2006, and this is today about 2042 or 43 years old. And this is what is called Himalayan pencil cedar, and scientifically it is called Juniperus polycarpus. And if you look at this tree, it is not very impressive. It's not the largest or the tallest or the biggest or anything, because it grows under very high arid conditions, cold deserts, where water is not available at all. And the more severe the conditions are, the better the growth rings appear to be. And therefore, this has been now the current, what should I say, the oldest tree from India. Tomorrow, someone may find an older tree also. The world's largest tree, using some parameters, is also in India. This is a banyan tree in Andhra Pradesh, very close to the Karnataka-Andhra border in a place called Kadiri. And this is a huge banyan. And this banyan, when compared with 16 other banyan trees from different parts of the world, turned out to be the largest. What was the criteria? They measured through Google Maps, two-dimensional canopy area. So these are satellite maps, and then made by Google. And look at this. This is one tree. And look at the other smaller trees. They are there in that trees. And this is the largest tree on this planet by virtue of the two-dimensional canopy area. This is a net canopy area. That means you don't include these spaces in between. Suppose you include gross canopy area, it will be much more. Its canopy area is roughly about 19,100 odd meters, square meters. That is equivalent to 2.7 football fields. 20,000 people can stand under this tree. And it is like a mini forest, single tree. And banyans have lots of these columnar roots which are associated with it, and it anchors the tree so well. And we should be proud of the fact that it's the world's largest tree with such a canopy area. Actually, the legend associated with this tree is there was a lady called Timmamma, and in Telugu this is known as Timmamma Marimanu, which means Timmamma's banyan. And basically, she was a very pious lady, very devoted to her husband. When the husband died, she jumped onto his funeral pyre and committed sati. And while the fire was still burning, apparently one of the branches caught, it started actually sprouting leaves. And legend says this tree has originated from such a branch of the funeral pyre. And under this tree, they have made a shrine for Timmamma. And nowadays they consider her as an embodiment of Lakshmi. And therefore, people who are childless go there and worship. And the time when I went there, some people had come to thank the goddess for actually granting them, children, and so on and so forth. So this is a tree which is also held sacred, and it is the largest tree in the world, not only in India. You must have heard of the great banyan tree in Kolkata, which is fifth in position compared to this. Next to this, the second largest banyan in the entire world is a tree near Bharuch in a river of the Narmada, an island made by the Narmada river, and that is called Kabirwar. And probably that is the oldest banyan in the world, because there are records that Alexander the Great, when he came here, one of his generals called Nearchus actually brought his army and they camped under the tree. It's of course very difficult to confirm or deny this, but it's certainly a very ancient tree. And if you looked at cross canopy area, that tree is larger than Timmamma. That is, if you included the space also between that. So let me take you to Kerala now from Andhra Pradesh and show you the tallest wild-grown teak in India. And this is very famous as Kannimara teak. And this tree, when I went there, it was summer when the tree would have shed all the leaves and you can hardly see any leaves on this tree. But come rain, it will be filled up with beautiful large leaves, and it is the season for the flowers and fruiting of teak trees. I see them all over Mysore. It makes a beautiful sight. And this is considered to be about 500 years old, and it has a height of 48.5 meters, which means it is the height of a 14-story building. Now imagine conducting water to the 14th story near the tip without making any noise, without polluting the air. You won't hear this tree pumping water to the tips. It's just silently standing there. And if you look at its girth, 5 people are needed with outstretched arms to surround this tree. And if you look at the shape of this trunk, it is fluted and it reminds you of Qutub Minar of Delhi. And the one in front is a friend of mine called Dr. Satish from Tropical Botanical Research Institute in Trivandrum. The one next to him on the other side is Mr. Haridas, who passed away under very tragic circumstances about 6 months after he came with me to see this tree. Very sorry about that. So this tree is something that is a marvel in the Parambakulam forest of Kerala. And this tree, it's wild grown teak. And all the wild teak trees in India have been completely finished off by the British. Because at one time, the British were using oak for shipbuilding. And most of the time, the British used to fight with other maritime countries like Spain, Portugal, France, and so on. And wherever they went, they needed wood for shipbuilding. And they ran out of their oak, and then They said that we need some oak for our shipbuilding because their, maritime power determines their real power. Because if they don't have ships, they don't have power. So they sent frantic requests and urgent letters to all their colonies to locate suitable replacement for oak. And for their good luck, we had teak all over Western Ghats and part of central India. And they started systematically harvesting, rapaciously harvesting teak tree. And a time came by the end of the 18th century, there were hardly any trees of teak left in the wild. And so you might ask the natural question, how did the Kanimara teak escape their British eggs? And why did it not get cut? Um, there are four tribes in the Parambakulam area. All of them are actually, they worship, uh, they live inside the forest and they worship trees and so on. And these people at least believe that the Kanimara teak is the abode of Sapta Matrikas, Sapta Kaniyadar as they say that in Tamil. And because it is the abode of these virgin gods, it is called Kannimara because there are these virgin gods abode in this tree. So the legend says when the British went to cut the tree, blood actually gushed out of the trunk, so they spared it. And therefore, we still have a 500-year plus teak tree still in this country. And there are not many trees of this vintage in India at all. Now, British also realizing this, they made the first teak plantation in Kerala and started cultivating teak for their shipbuilding and so on. That is also there, but I don't have time to cover that today. So we'll leave it for some other time. So now let me give you a couple of examples of trees that are of historical importance. Many of you might have been to Bijapur, what is today known as Vijaypura in northern Karnataka. And this was a place where the Adil Shahi kings ruled for a couple of centuries. And in their regime, there were many trees of baobab, or what are known as botanically Adansonia digitata trees. Baobabs are not native to India. They have all come, without doubt, from Africa to India. And earlier people used to think that the Arabs brought the seeds during the trade, but more recent research has shown that it is actually the slave trade through the Indian Ocean that brought the baobab seeds to India. So there was one huge tree. Wherever these slaves, people who came to convert others, traders, priests, missionaries, domestic help, uh, generals for warfare, they were all imported from Africa by Indian kings. And all of them brought a fruit of baobab with them because baobab fruits can be maintained for more than 6 to 8 months without any problem. And they are very rich in vitamin C. It's just like having a Nimbu Sharbat. And if you go to Mando in Madhya Pradesh, the only city in this country where they sell on the roadside baobab fruits and they also make Sharbat. And it's very delicious drink which cools you down and supplies you vitamin C. So, this particular tree in Bijapur was located near a very touristy place called Ibrahim Roza, where there are mausoleums of some Adil Shahi noble people. And it was a huge tree, with a diameter, circumference of something like 10.3 meters. And baobabs are very peculiar in their appearance. They look like squat in their appearance. The stem is very huge and stout, but not very tall. And when the leaves are shed, the branches look like the roots. Therefore, it is known as the upside down tree. as if the crown is buried inside the soil and the tree is hanging with its roots on the top. So this particular tree was used by Adil Shahi kings as an execution tree, where people were beheaded under it, or they were hanged on these trees. The enemies of the kings, or the enemies of the government, or political opponents. So, a man called Philip Meadows Taylor was in the employ of the Nizam of Hyderabad. He never served with the East India Company, but served under the Nizam in India. And he wrote very delightful novels. The first novel he wrote was called Confessions of a Thug. And this was about the thuggery and thuggis or thuggery in India. You know, the British made a big deal out of thugs and pindaris and so on. And they said they have eradicated all of them. And they justified their ruling or the colonization of India because Indians are so primitive, because they have these tribes which go and kill people, loot them, and so on and so forth. So, this man wrote a novel called Confessions of a Thug, which was his first novel and became so famous that people wanted to, that was the first debut novel of his, which became a sensation when it was released in the London literary scene. So much so that young Queen Victoria wanted the galley proofs directly sent to her for reading before it appeared in the market. So his third novel of Meadows Taylor was called Tara, a Maratha tale. And this describes a love affair between a Maratha Brahmin girl and a Muslim general from the Adil Shahi side. And in this romance, he builds up the story in the background of the decline of the Adil Shahi kingdom and the rise of the Maratha Empire. And it's a beautiful book published in 1863. It's available on the internet freely. All of you can download it and read. It's such a beautiful book. In that, he writes, Meadows Taylor mentions this tree at least 17 times as the execution tree in that novel. And how do we know it is the same tree? Because it appeared in that novel. A man called Theodore Cook, who wrote the Flora of the Bombay Presidency, he was a scholar, and he has written his book, Flora of the Bombay Presidency, still referred to by people like me to look at the flora of current Maharashtra. He mentions, when he refers to this tree, that this is the tree that Meadows Taylor mentions in his book Tara. So I visited this tree in 2014, February, and took this photograph. After 1 year almost, she suddenly collapsed and fell down. Those two pictures in the second row are taken from the Hindu, and it died after a year after I saw this. It's no more. There is a very great concern that the largest and oldest baobabs in the world are suddenly dying in the last decade. There's a paper in Nature, and people say we don't know the cause, probably climate change is the reason for this. So this is one historic tree which actually did exist and was used as a tree for execution. The other example that I would cite for historic tree is a people tree which grows near the clock tower of Dehradun. They call this the Ghanta Ghar, just like we call ours as Chik Gadiara, Dot Gadiara, and so on. So they call this Ghanta Ghar. They say that the clock tower is the identity, that represents the identity of Dehradun. And it's indeed beautiful to look at. It has a hexagonal shape, and when it used to work, people from far from that tower could hear every hour the bell, the peal of this bell. And there is a people tree, as I said, which grows next to this Ghantaghar. And it is said that Sarojini Naidu who was the governor of the central provinces in 1948, came there to lay the foundation stone for this cantata. She also she also planted the sapling of this people, which is today something like, 80 and 90 years old or something like that. So this has been an eyesore for the administration. They want this tree to be removed from there or totally cut off or taken away somewhere and replanted for several years. They say this is spoiling the beauty of our clock tower. It should not be there, and therefore they tried very hard. And the tree was accused of hampering the renovation of the clock tower for several years. But the citizens of Dehradun have seen enough of these development projects, and they don't want this tree to be removed from the center circle of the clock tower. So they went on an agitation for several years, and one day in 2015, they brought some 1,500, 2,000 women, all dressed up in their best dresses, and they came with rakis, these Raksha Sutras, and tied it around the branches of this tree. This made a big splash in the media, and finally the government announced that they will let the tree be. And today, the tree still stands in the next to the Ghantaghar in Dehradun. More interestingly, was the tree really planted by Sarojini Naidu? When I saw this tree, I thought it was much older than the 19 years it should be, because it's much larger. Because I saw another tree in Dehradun which was planted by Mahatma Gandhi in 1929, and that and this are very different. And so I had my suspicions, and I took me some 3-4 months to determine that it is much older than when Sarojini Naidu is supposed to have planted it. So I looked up all the gazettes and press notes of that period and contacted so many people. And one of the persons who helped me was Mr. Ruskin Bond, who is an authority on Dehradun trees. And he said the tree was there when he was a small boy. So obviously, it was not planted by Sarojini Naidu. It is much older than its 90 years as it is claimed, and therefore it is much more of a heritage than even the clock tower, and therefore it has more rights to stand where it is than even the clock tower. Fortunately, it is there today. The point that I wanted to make here is that built heritage is much more valued in India everywhere than living, breathing heritage, which is represented by trees. And I can cite you chapter and verse. I can give you examples from Karnataka, Northeast, Delhi, or wherever. We value built heritage much more than we value green heritage. I'll give you 1 or 2 examples of. You will tell me when the time is up. Somebody is keeping time, madam. How much time do you have?
It's rather long, but please.
Okay.
We have 15 minutes.
Right. So here is a tree from Manipur, which is actually very important culturally to the Nagas. And this is actually what we call as pilkran in Hindi. It's a species of fig, of ficus. I don't know whether it is called matti or something in Kannada. It is a kind of ficus tree. And this is not atti. Atti is Ficus glomerata. This is Ficus virens. So it is probably matti or something. I don't know. I'll look up and tell you. I'm not very conversant with Kannada names because I've lived all my life till now in Delhi. So you must excuse me for that. I learned in Delhi. So this tree is associated with the primeval Naga mother. The origin of the Naga started from her, and this tree is associated with that. So, where did the Nagas come from to India? We don't have any written records, and therefore there are many speculations and many views are held as to whether they came from China, they came from Mongolia, they came from Myanmar. Currently, many people think they came either from Thailand or Indonesia. Anyway, a large group of them, which today are called Angami Nagas, Ao Nagas, Chakesang Nagas, Lotha Nagas, Mao Nagas, Palomi Nagas, and Tangkol Nagas. They all came from uh, this island or Indonesia and settled in a small village called Makke, which is in the Senapati district, which is northernmost part of Manipur. And basically, there is this Naga myth which says that the primordial mother, who is called Zimosiro, Zilimosiro, she was actually sitting under a tree and having a nap. Then it seems white clouds surrounded her. And then she got impregnated by the cloud. And she begot three offspring. The first offspring was called Okay, the tiger, representing the entire forest world or the wildlife. The second son was called Ora, who represented the celestial beings, the godly beings. And the third son was Umai, who was a human being. So all the Nagas, according to this legend, originated because of the clouds which impregnated the mother. Therefore, Nagas are also called the cloud people because they originated from that source. So the first son, as the mother grew, she looked after them, they all became big. The first son was very indifferent to the mother, and he would always, whenever he was alone with her, he would say, "When you die, I will eat this hand, this, this ear, or nose, or something." And she was never comfortable with the eldest son because he always used to tell her what he would like to eat from her body part because he was a wild animal. So the second son, who was a celestial being, was not at all interested in her at all. And she would not attend to her needs properly. So she was not even comfortable with him. The third son, Oman, was a human being. He always cared for the mother and he protected her, he met all her needs, he looked after her in health and ill health. And so she was very fond of him. So when she died, actually he buried her under the hearth in the kitchen so that the tiger does not know about this and eat her body. So today, many Naga communities still bury their dead under the hearth. And the last son or the youngest son in the family also inherits the ancestral home. And this legend originates here. So the legend says that because these people are all originated from this primordial mother, later Makkah became their center of settlement, and when they became too many in number, they dispersed from there. There is another tree which is called a wild pear tree, just to the next village. It's called Srijoba village, where the wild pear tree was the place where they held the final dinner before departing to various other places because they couldn't all be contained in Makkah. So when they went to various other places, they took various names, Angami, Ao, Mao, Chakisang, etc. etc. Earlier they were just known as Nagas. So this tree is still there in the village Makkah, and you can see so many epiphytes growing on this. Now this here is the home of the chief next to this tree. And just as an interesting aside, the current director of the Botanical Survey of India is Dr. Mao. And he is the head of this village. If he were not to be the director of Botanical Survey of India, he would be the chief of this village in the Nagas, Mao Nagas. So this is one example. The second example is I want to talk to you about the Parsis and how a tree is associated with the Parsis culturally. The Parsis actually Zoroastrians who came from Persia, which is now Iran, as early as the 7th century because of religious persecution. And they ran away to the western coast of India. And one of the places they settled down was a place called Sanje in southern Gujarat. And Sanje is a very ancient and large settlement for Parsi people. And the story goes when they came there, the then ruler called Jagi Rana, they requested him, can we please settle in your place because we are persecuted in our own country, we have nowhere else to go. So the Rana said, look, my country is overflowing with people. I cannot allow foreigners to come and settle in this country, and your dresses are different, your God is different, your language is different. How will you ever mix with our people? And then he, as a symbol of his what he said, he sent them a whole bowl of milk filled to the brim, and saying that this bowl cannot contain even one more drop of milk, it will all spill out. So then the Parsi leader asked him, can you please send some sugar to us? So the Rana didn't know what they were doing. He sent some sugar to them. And this leader poured that sugar into the milk. And the sugar went into the milk without spilling it. And then the sugar disappeared into the milk without actually seeming to disturb it in any way. So he says, we will be like sugar in the milk in your country. So please let us be here. And therefore, he allowed them, saying that you should dress like our people. You can worship your God, but dress like us, speak our language, you are allowed to stay. So the Parsis have erected a stump or a pillar in Sanjan, which is called the Parsi stump there in 1971, I think it was open to the public. You can still go and see it there. Very close to that stump, there is a mango tree, which is called the walking mango tree. How does this tree walk? In Gujarati, it's not Chalto Ambo. It means the walking mango, actually. So this tree, the seed of which is supposed to have brought by these early Parsis from Iraq, and they planted one mango tree from their country when they landed in Sanje. And what this tree is doing today is, as the tree grows, one of the branches goes down and near the ground, and you can see that branch almost touching the ground there. And once that branch touches the ground, the lower portion of the branch produces roots, and it gets planted there. And new branches sprout from this side. The older side of the tree, all these branches will die. So it will grow this side, and then it will grow further. Another branch will grow there and take root. So this way, this tree has been moving from the place of its original sowing eastwards from the coast. So the local people say that in the last 250 years, this mango tree has moved 200 meters from the original place of its planting. And that is phenomenal. And it is still moving in the eastern direction. Currently, it is on the fields of a farmer, a Muslim family, but they don't disturb it. They let it grow in their field, and they hope that some year later it will move on to the next field, and so on. So that's why it is called Chalto Ambo, and it is associated with the culture of the Zoroastrians, and what we call the Parsi community here. And it is wonderfully good. I have never seen any other mango doing this kind of walking eastwards. It doesn't move westwards. So from the coast, it is moving into India. And God knows where the journey is going to end. So let me give you one example, because I think the time may not be enough. Now what I mentioned in my title of my talk, the tree that swallowed about a post. Now, if you go to Jammu, there is an Indo-Pakistan border there in a place called Suchetkar. Now, this used to be in the undivided India, an octroi post. Trains used to run between Amritsar and Lahore. And there is a train track even there today. Some stations are there, but they're not well maintained. I'm told that on the Pakistani side they are maintained better. So this octroi post has now become the check post between Pakistan and India. You can see no man's land there. This side is our gate. You can see Pakistani flag and Indian flag there. And On the no man's line or no man's land, there is a people tree, an early Ashwatha tree growing. The tree doesn't care about whether it is Pakistan or India. It produces two branches towards Pakistan and three branches towards India. And on both sides, people have actually built platforms, which I'll show you in the next slide. Now, this international boundary was demarcated in 1947 by a man called Radcliffe, who never visited India, who arbitrarily drew a line between India and Pakistan, and it's today called the Radcliffe line. This tree stands exactly on the Radcliffe line. And on that line, these are the border posts. The border posts here, this one is border post number 919. I'm sorry to focus on that. I don't know if you can see the number. And there are other 918, 917, that side, and so the Radcliffe line goes marking this border. And very close to this kind of border pillar, number 918, there was this people tree growing, very close to that pillar. And because of secondary growth, it started growing very close to the border pillar and then very slowly engulfed the road. And it swallowed up the whole border post. I'll show you that. See, this is our side, and that is the Pakistani side. It produces three branches one side, two branches on the other side. And you are not allowed to take your cameras here at all, and not even cell phones. And I was asked to deposit my camera outside, and with great difficulty they allowed me when I told them why I want this picture. They said you can take your cell phone, but you have to go with our Jawan, otherwise the Pakistanis will shoot you. So this guy came with me, and I asked him, "Can I have a photo with you?" He said, "No, no, no. You can only take my back, all from profile, so you can't see his face." So this guy came to protect me and make sure that the Pakistanis are not provoked enough to fire at me. So this is the tree which engulfed the entire border post. And very wisely, both the Pakistani and the BSF of India decided that henceforth pillar number 918 will be represented by this tree. So this is the only living border post in the entire world as far as I know. No other post is actually a living, breathing border post. They are all actually, it's a unique thing. People go there to see this tree. I serendipitously discovered this. You can see here in this, you can still see, there is too much light here. Some bricks can be seen there, probably here. So some concrete and brick is still engulfed by this tree. So this is a botanically curious tree. Do I have time to speak about two trees or shall I close here?
Yes?
Yes? Okay. So now let me move to Srinagar or Jammu, I'm sorry, J&K further. And there is a small place called, you all have heard of Gulmarg, which is a very big destination for snow sports and so on and so forth. It's a great tourist place. Just about 9-10 kilometers before Gulmarg, there is a place called Tangmarg. And Tangmarg is actually, in English, it means peach town because peaches grow there very well. So there, very close to that, about 2 kilometers from there is a village called Yarika. And there on that village, there is a small regional station of the Indian Institute for Medicines of the CSIR. And in that station, there is a very, very remarkable tree, which is the giant sequoia. There is only one tree there. Now, giant sequoias, for those who are not very familiar with them, are perhaps some of the world's largest trees by volume. If you take the total volume of wood, just the trunk, not even the branches, they have the largest volumes of giant sequoias. And more interestingly, They grow only on the western coast of California, in the higher regions in the mountains. How did this one tree come to this middle of nowhere near Tangmar? And why is there one tree here? And it is producing cones. The cones fall down, but the seeds have never germinated. This tree was discovered in 1975 by one Professor D.L. Dutt. He recently, about 8 months ago, I think he passed away. Uh, he discovered this and published a paper, but nobody looked at it. Everybody forgot about this tree. Suddenly, I mean, somebody told me, have you seen this tree? There's only one tree in the entire India. Now, how did this tree come up there? And why did it come up there? Who brought it there? So, basically, because Gulmarg is a beautiful snow sports area, many of the British people used to go there for skiing and so on and so forth. And they used to go with a big retinue of people with them. Some of the local people say that one of those officers could have brought a seedling or two, and this might have survived. And but my own feeling is a man called Sir Peter Henry Clutterbuck, who was the former Inspector General of Forests who retired from India, went to serve under the King of Kashmir at that time. And he employed him as the chief of his forest. And this area was exactly where he worked. And he could have sourced this tree either from USA or from Europe. And they might have brought 2, 3 plants, of which one has survived. The tragedy is this is growing so far away from its original home. It has no kins. It sets seeds, but seeds don't germinate. And it has no companion. And I was actually, before I end this, just to tell you, look at this. There is one General Sherman tree, which is most famous giant sequoia in the world. Volume, the weight of this is something like 1,400 tons, right? And if you look at the circumstance at the base, it's 131 meters or 103 feet. Look at the size of these people compared to the diameter, I mean, the stump. He is a 6-footer, just like when he is looking at the top of this tree. It is when, if you put a mouse here, a mouse looking at a 6-foot person, the same perspective you should imagine of a human being who is 6-footer and looking at this giant sequoia tree. And this is the world's largest tree by volume. So such are the giant sequoia trees. So it's very remarkable as to why one single tree is present in India. And I was moved to say that located so far away from its natural home, in an alien habitat in the middle of nowhere, forgotten by those who were responsible for its journey here, devoid of kin, practically unknown to the outside world, underappreciated and unable to reproduce. There is one small consolation though. The director of the Indian Institute of Research has actually got 2 paintings made by a local artist called K.K. Gandhi. And one of them is a beautiful painting, large painting of more than this size in his institute. The second painting hangs in the Central Drug Research Institute in Lucknow. So it is commemorated through those, but otherwise it is entirely lonely. I think I will stop here. I could have given you one more example of Nallur Tamarind Grove, close to Bangalore. But I think I made the point, which is that, we, first of all, trees are very important, not only for our survival, but for various other needs. And if we don't protect them, they will no longer be here. And unfortunately, we are cutting down trees without even knowing their importance. When you cut those 40 trees in Mysore, you don't know how many of them could have been iconic. And when you cut 1,500 trees in the Dehradun Expressway, you don't know how many of them could have stories. like this associated with each one of them. So, lack of awareness makes us become indifferent to our environment. So, first and foremost, through this work, I hope to increase the awareness about trees. Only when you are aware, you can appreciate the importance of trees. And with appreciation goes ownership. Then only you feel this is ours. This is our heritage. We must protect these. And therefore, ownership comes if you appreciate something. And ownership then makes you absolutely a champion for conservation of such trees. And I'm not saying conserve only iconic trees. Iconic trees are charismatic representatives of the tree kind. And therefore, when you choose them, like the tiger represents the whole ecosystem health, right? And therefore, when you choose iconic trees, you learn about them, you appreciate them, you honor them, you protect them, and you pass this on to your next generation for safekeeping. Because older, larger trees are much more important than smaller trees. So planting trees is great. Every year the government organizes the one Mahotsav, and in the next week nobody remembers about what you planted. I have seen no data anywhere in any government record which says how much percentage of the trees that they planted last year has survived this year. So continue planting trees. That's absolutely fine. But please protect what we already have. That is much more important, at least equally important. And therefore, I hope through this work, uh, there is more awareness, there is more appreciation, and therefore leading to awareness. So what I'm trying to tell you is celebrate the rich heritage of the green trees that surround us. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, sir. I know that you have lots of questions, but I think we limit to some 3 or 4. Please. Any question?
Yes.
Is there any between quality inspection periodically by the experts? One thing is lost in Karnataka. Others only indicated.
Vijapur.
It could be due to Garadam, the Dodra fungus. Okay. That is very harmful many other tree species like this maple tree, Ulma tree. We have thousands and many we lost in the last couple of years.
Well, most of the states have what is known as the Tree Act. In theory,